Welcome. I am Michele Leclaire, Executive Director of Buckham Gallery. Today, I am chatting with Rebecca Zeiss, whose exhibition, Seeking Solace, is on view through January 8th. Seeking Solace is influenced by life experiences of shared vulnerability, referencing memory, dreams, and the collective unconscious. Additionally, her work may be viewed online and on our website at buckhamgallery.org.
Before we join the conversation, I would like to say thank you to our incredible audience, whether visiting the gallery in person or viewing these videos online, and to all the artists who submit to our exhibition calls. I appreciate you. Next, I would like to say a big thank you to all the individuals and organizations who support Buckham Fine Arts Project and Gallery, including the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Arts. The Greater Flint Arts Council Share Art Genesee Grant Program, made possible by the Genesee County Arts Education and Cultural Enrichment Millage Fund. Thank you.
Welcome, Rebecca.
Hey.
I'm so happy to have you here and to be sharing this incredible body of work with our Flint audience and our greater Flint community and now online community.
Thank you for having me, and what a beautiful job that your crew and yourself, everyone at Buckham, has done in the exhibitions.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we definitely try our best to present the work, just so it can be experienced the best way possible. Okay, so this is fun because you're an accomplished mid-Michigan artist as well as a professor, as we mentioned, at U of M Flint. And now we have the opportunity to learn more about you. I would like to start our conversation with some background information. Where are you from and what led you down the path to art making or making?
Okay. You're the first person that has asked me that as a more art making general question. So I love that. I was born in Midland, Michigan, and I still live there. And my dad transferred a lot. So we moved around the continent a little bit, and I got to spend 4 years in Belgium. And that, that is probably where I first started thinking about being an artist. And the drawing and paintings that I did when I was there, they're really, really bad. But it did get me thinking about art. And in hindsight, my grandfather, Richard Zeiss, is a painter, and he had actually helped me with my very first painting. So as I was, inventing what I wanted to do with my life as a teenager, I knew it was not photography, having learned that the word Zeiss is affiliated with photography. That, predestination idea of what you're supposed to do with your life seemed like that was it. So it couldn't be that. And I started studying painting and drawing at Delta College nearby me, and had some amazing instructor professors, Charles Breed, Larry Butcher, Linda Menger. And when I transferred to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, that's where I picked up the photography aspect that I had been, making sure to not do. And I studied with Bill Davis there, and it was such a revealing thing to all of a sudden realize photography as an art form can be more than just capturing an image. It can actually have a narrative and be about something and have more depth to it than just a surface thing. So then what I started doing from there is I incorporated mixed media in my graduate work so that I could make work that didn't just hang on the wall. And my thesis exhibit was long, elongated panels that hung in the mid space that you could walk around, and they were printed on both sides on Japanese kozo paper.
Oh, wow. Oh, that sounds incredible.
So then I landed here.
Yeah, Well, that was really fun. We actually, two of those names, Larry Butcher had a piece here, two pieces actually, I think, in our Eros and Thanatos show in February 2020. So that's really exciting to have all these little connections. I mean, really, what a small world. And now we have your incredible work here. Oh, as I said, it's a beautiful show. And of course, I love the imagery and the feeling of remembrance in your work. And I am really looking forward to learning more about your process, because, it's photography, but it's not what we think of most commonly done, nowadays, when people are just out with their little digital cameras taking pictures. And it's so, has sort of this great feeling of nostalgia.
Ah, that's a perfect word choice, because it references memory as well. I like that. Well, a little bit
Okay.
about my process. I started out with, trying to invent a body of work that I would work on for a while. And because of that, you're kind of trying different things. So I was working for quite a while on hearing people's dreams and trying to come up with my translation of their dreams when they described it to me. And one of the pieces in this show is kind of that crossover between the invented dreams and the seeking solace. So as it kind of shifted and inventing the visual that went with it, it turned into, I kept the stories and I kept what people were telling me, but as they were telling me their story, I was photographing them. And it became this sort of really anonymous sort of thing because some of the stories were very, very personal. So I wanted to come up with a way that I could put the story together and visually tell it. And I've kept that written component too. So as I've been collecting these stories, I've been collecting the written pieces that go with them. And you mentioned the nostalgia. So what I've been trying to do is resource older technology, so the 1800s technology of bringing in the image. And then, so I end up with this small image, and this has got a protection layer on it. It was a good summer. I really got some great plates. But the images are captured with the camera that you can see in the background. And it's a 8x10 view camera. And it has a antique lens on it that is called a Petzval lens. And it has this really narrow area of focus. And I love that because it, the look that it gives the images is this really, really secretive, almost veiling or not revealing all of the information about the image.
Yeah, let me pull one up real quick because that's really interesting. All right, so you're talking about that narrow area of focus. So are you actually where the hands and the jars are is where your focus is, and that it's just naturally becoming less focused?
Well, this is an earlier piece. I think this one is, let's look at, this is number 19 in the series, and I'm at 40 something now. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. I started out, the very first images I took with the 8x10 view camera and the antiquarian processes, which is called wet plate collodion, where you're making a tin type or an ambrotype. So whether it's on glass or metal. And then I got nervous if I could continue to do an entire body of work with that process, because it's kind of, it requires UV light. So you're working with it either outside or you're supplying really high intensity UV light yourself. So I also made a version digitally too. This particular one, I still have a Petzval lens on the camera. It is a digital camera, and I am capturing that really narrow area of focus and letting the rest fall out. One of the beautiful things the lens does is it kind of makes things swirl in the background. And as I continued to experiment with that, I built my confidence more. So this summer, all of my plates were completely the antiquarian process. Where previous years, I've mixed it up a little bit. Let's see, 2000, I was doing all collodion plates at the end of the year, but I started out the beginning with mixing it up with some digital pieces too.
So the title of the exhibition is Seeking Solace. Why did you choose this title for your body of work?
That's a good question. And I think about it a lot, because is the title, does that lead people to what they think this means too much? But I decided to stay with it. And it's really difficult to keep track of the images when they're a number. But, that was my commitment to this project. And so the reason I am staying with the title and the reason that I started with it, the original first 10 images that I took was with my daughter as we were inventing, is this a project? So the first one of the hands holding the nest was a plate that we took experimentally, and it sat on my desk for about a year thinking, how you, David Letterman's, is it going to, I think it's something like, does it float or does it sink? And I had this plate on my desk looking at it thinking, is it something or is it nothing? And I invited her back the following summer, and we took, I think, 14 images over the course of, she would come over every day and we would work on, what it's about, what's the composition. And she was experiencing a lot of anxiety in her life. And we used that as the idea for what we were visually putting together. And now as people come and work with me and they bring what we invented to be a memory vessel, and they tell me their story, usually it's something that contains, the memory of something that someone has given you, or something special in your life. So it's almost like the object itself has this aura and essence that's telling the story itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the collaborative nature, not only in each image that you're making, because it's sharing the story of the sitter, but also the collaborative nature of the actual, beginning of the project, working on it, with your daughter and seeing if it would it float. That's really great. Yeah, so you touched on something that actually leads into some of the questions I have, but in your statement, you mentioned artifacts. We see as we look at the images that each subject is holding an artifact. In many ways, it feels like the object or the artifact is the subject of the work. What is the importance of the objects?
The objects are acting as the memory vessel, and they are the thing that the person who is the background in the image selected to share and selected to have it be in the photograph and have that story go with it.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about sometimes them being really personal stories or something, you're trying to make them in a way, it seems anonymous, in the way you have cropped your compositions and they're focusing on that object. In addition to the images that you're collecting and sort of collaborating with the sitter, you are collecting their stories. And during the opening, we discussed sort of your plans a little bit, but I thought maybe you could share it over this recording for our viewers what your ultimate plan is or project.
Thank you. My goal is when I get to the end of the project, which I can't exactly foresee when that is because I haven't run out of people that have either found me, and I'm hoping more people find me, and I'm trying to invite people to share this with me too, but I don't know everyone. So I'm hoping the word gets out, people can find me and share, usually it is an hour to 3 hours to do an image capture using this old technology. And what I have them do is bring their special object and we spend time collaboratively together. And then I ask them to write their story. So I ask for that handwritten on a white piece of paper. And sometimes the story has evolved or changed, as it's been told or as we've collectively put together the image and the look that we want to. So I don't have them pre-write it. And the goal is when I get to the end that I will seek a publisher or maybe self-publish, but I want to put this together as a book. And I see the writing on one side with the image on the other. And I envisioned this as maybe a translucent piece of paper between the two, especially because not everybody feels like they need the story. Sometimes you just want to internalize the look of the image and land at your own conclusion of what you think that is. And we all like to assign, our own meanings to things too. So that way it's not like decided for everybody, but if they want to peek at the story, my goal is that it's on the opposite page.
Yeah, well, I love that. So let's talk about process, because this is a complicated process and beautiful, it sounds. Would you maybe talk about, and I realize I've been saying it wrong. It's not antiquated process. I'm sorry. Would you tell us about your process so I don't butcher the words?
Sure. Okay, so it's an antiquated process, which just is antique. And the process that I use is, about the third photographic process, from the beginning of inventing photographic processes. So the particular one that I use has the large format camera like I have in the background. And let's see if we can move it over to see it a little better there. And how you do this process is you start with a plate. So you can start with glass or metal, and you pour collodion onto it that's mixed with ether and let's see, so it's got ether, alcohol, the collodion mixture, which is like gun cotton, and it has a couple other elements in it like cadmium bromide and ammonium. There's an ammonium bromide in it as well. So the mixture pours onto the plate. The reason it's called a wet plate process is because you have to take the photograph while the plate's still wet. So this plate goes into a holder, and that holder, well, wait, you pour the plate with that chemistry on it, backtrack a little bit, and then you put the plate in a silver nitrate bath. And it sits in the silver nitrate bath, which makes it light sensitive. Then you take it out, you let it drip just a little bit, but it has to stay wet. It goes into a holder and put in the back of that camera, or a large format camera. Prior to preparing the plate, you had to focus on your subject and get everything all set so that it'll be ready the minute that you bring that plate to the camera. When I work with my collaborators, a lot of times they will put them in front of the camera, we'll come up with we think this is the look, and then we go downstairs, we make our first plate, we bring it out, they get back into the position that we figured out we think is the one, and then we expose the plate, which is usually on a bright sunny day, and new chemistry is usually a 30-second exposure. So that means they have to hold still. And if it's
That's longer than it sounds.
I know, and that's the reason, and I think that I started with this, that's the reason to not include the face at the very beginning, was because your face is going to move in that length of time, but you can probably hold your hands still. And, you know, it wasn't intentional. I didn't have a project yet when I first started pointing the camera at things that people would hold. It was just the technique. And so after you take the image, then you take the plate holder back out of the camera, you haul it back into the darkroom, or you can haul a darkroom with you. So you can make a car darkroom or a tent darkroom. And we've done all of those things, but it's just really nice to have the darkroom not mobile. So then, once you have exposed the plate, you take it out of the holder, you pour the developer on it, you watch it develop in front of you, and people love doing this and coming down and watching their image come together.
Yeah.
And then once it exists as an image, you want to stop that developing. So I usually put it in water. And at that point, depending on how good my chemistry was, usually it will be a negative image. Sometimes when my chemistry is older or the humidity is higher, it will actually be a positive. And then it finalizes in the fixer bath, or it inverts in the fixer bath.
Oh, that's interesting. Why would it sometimes be a positive instead of a negative?
It has to do with humidity. It has to do with how much light it got. So how well did you do at guessing, you know, exactly how bright was the UV out? And the age of the chemistry can come into that equation. So there's a lot of little nuances that shift. When the chemistry is perfect, a 30-second exposure, and I get a negative image, and it inverts in the fixer.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating. I love the whole, like, because similar to like printmaking, there are so many ways in which things could go not as planned, and sometimes that adds just to the beauty and of the image that you create. I just love the process.
Yeah, I think I'm addicted to the little things that happen along the way. So, you know, like, I think this, well, here, I'll try and hold one up. This plate, and you can see in the print on the wall all of the little tiny water droplets on the bottom of it. And you know, I've really come to embrace the small little things that go wrong with, you know, it wasn't a perfect plate, which actually gives me a lot of appreciation for the artists that made perfect plates out in the desert and in the mountains and hauled all their things around, that they got perfect plates. And, you know, I have all of these little tiny things that happen to mine, but I actually appreciate that, because that shows, you know, the object as an artifact, and the actual process is showing in it.
Yeah, and it seems I don't know, more real, more handmade that way. I would think. Yeah. Okay, so how do you arrive at a solution to the look of the images you create?
The collaborator that I'm working with, because, you know, in a way they're saying this is okay to be the finished piece since we're deciding it together. And sometimes back in older versions of the project, you know, maybe they'd spend, you know, 3 hours with me, and we wouldn't ever get the perfect solution. And what we would come up with is that if I take part of one plate and part of another, is that acceptable to them to be the finished piece? So I can see some of the images behind you. If I'm looking at the one with the wolf, was
Mm.
how it was captured and how it finished. Or the one with the garden pieces, we took one small little piece that we weren't getting in the other plates and combined one flower with the rest of that image. And
Wow.
when I'm working with my collaborator, I'm asking, is this okay that this is the image, or is it okay that I edited? You know, are you fine with that? The one with the Mother Mary that I also see above, you know, I cropped it a little. I dodged and burned a couple of areas. So the plate, the finished plate on some of these is not exactly what the finished image looks like. But the conversation I have with my collaborator is, what creative license do I have to work with this, and you're still okay with this as your story?
Mhm. Well, I love how you're inviting your collaborator to come in and open up and be vulnerable and share this story and their artifact of their memory or connection to someone. And you are very, I love how respectful you are of, you know, their part of the process, you know, in it. I mean, that is just um I think so important to this type of a project, have that kind of sensitivity, but also you don't always think of artists as offering that, because there's often, you know, often artists set up the model, they dictate and direct the entire thing from beginning to end. And I love how open and allows it to be. And I think it really comes through in your images.
Oh, thank you. That would be like the
Yeah.
ultimate hope that's happening.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah. So earlier you were talking about sort of your time in Belgium as sort of what maybe set you off onto your art path. So now I'm kind of curious, so we could share with our viewers, you know, what are the major influences on your work now?
The Probably when I was in graduate school, and you know how you're supposed to look for influences, I came across Olivia Parker, and she does object images and she does a lot of work with shadows. And for a while, she was a significant influence to me just in looking at objects and their historical or their communicating a story, so having a narrative to it. Then as I was working up, figuring out really what I was going to do with the direction I was going, I came across a couple artists that still to this day affect the images that I make and the look that I have. And one is Susan K. Grant, and she does these amazing shadow stories. And when she puts when she assembles them, she's actually photographing the shadow that's made. So
Wow.
Susan K. Grant is one. Keith Carter has become influential, and his work has this really shallow depth of field. He uses a medium format camera, so he does kind of this tilt shift, so everything else falls out except for the thing that is the object or the subject in the image. And then, of course, Jerry Uelsman is a major influence. And probably as I very first started in photography and discovered that you can take images and you can stack them and layer them in the dark room and create prints from more than one image, that was magical to me.
Yeah. Oh, I will have to look up some of those. I didn't know all those artists. Oh, thank you. Um, so something I was thinking about, you were talking about earlier sort of the long hanging pieces that you did, where you were able to walk around, and now we have these. So do you have any plans for maybe what might come after this? I know you have, this project is still ongoing, but you have other or side projects that you are doing. So you have, I know you're also a printmaker, you know, what other things might you be considering or working on?
That's actually interesting in hindsight to think about the ethereal pieces. So the previous version of this show and some of the pieces that are actually physically in the show, for instance, the one with the little fireflies behind you. And let me see, so the one with the house frame, both of those were and are printed on a torchon paper. They were actually hung over bamboo, really big, thick bamboo pieces in a previous version of the show, a really, really early version. So it would have been, let me think, I think it is fall 2019. The way that I presented this work was hanging it so that you could walk around it. And I took the prints, I disassembled them and decided that this was the better presentation for this work because it more closely referenced the plate itself and the layering and the varnishing and the look of the plate. But I really love having alternate format versions of presentation. Some other things that I'm working on along the way, like you said, as a printmaker, I've been doing some cyanotype, some Van Dyke prints with the students together. And then every semester we have an exchange. So it forces me to make a production of a print process or an image that I've been working on. And for fun, we went down to Old Car City in Georgia a couple weeks ago. And I have this huge amount of images that I've taken to see what happens with them next in some of these older processes.
Yeah, I love print exchanges. It's a great way to like build your personal art collection. But you were talking about the process of like the varnishing, or the actually not the epoxy layering and the way you have them presented in this format, because that's what I love. They have that feel of those like antique plates, you know, and they have sort of that mysterious glow even. So I do love this presentation as much as I'd love to check out the free hanging as well.
Yeah. Well, it is actually, depending on how the Buckham shows are recorded, I exhibited with a couple of other artists, like 4 or 5 artists. The very first time that I exhibited at Buckham, it could be like 2006, around there, that I exhibited those pieces.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
to
so
look up
I
to
don't
see.
have the year in mind, but I do remember installing them because they're really installation heavy.
I bet. Yeah, and those were high ceilings in there too, in that building. Yeah. Well, so when did you said this body of work, you talked about them being the older ones, but you also said 2019. So you haven't been working on these for that long, really. I mean,
The previous version, as it's been shifting and continues to shift, the 2019 show, I just got the work done in time to install it into that fall show. And boy, I think I have the year right. So let's think about this for a minute. The shutdown of the schools for COVID was March
Mhm.
Ooh, so that means that I missaid it. It must be a 2018 show.
Okay.
Time has gone so fast with this shutdown that it just like messes up all your versions of reality.
It
All right.
does. It's kind of curious to think about. This is a lot of work to have done in whether, I guess, 2, 3,
Ah,
4 years. It was really incredible way it has developed in that amount of time.
ah, that's actually a nice observation because I remember when I very first started working on it, and it wasn't the project I meant to be working on. All of a sudden, I needed to make my project work, and I thought I was doing work about dreams and storytelling of dreams. So to me, it seems like with the couple of years I've been working on it that I haven't done enough work. So I love that you think it's a lot of work.
I do. And you know, of course it feels like it takes a long time to make. So and it seems so rich and deep. And I can't, as we were sitting here talking about it, my mind, of course, was going back to talking about sort of that the sharing of their personal stories for the object and behind it. As I could imagining the sort of opening up and vulnerability in that kind of shared space. Are there many tears that happen during these times? Do people, it's like an overwhelming of emotion sometimes? I don't know. There's like a feel, and maybe it's just me reading into it. I feel like there's often loss associated with these images.
So far, no one has had tears, but not that that couldn't happen, and not that maybe, I don't see that, because there's a lot of process involved in this, and obviously I love process, but there is a lot of emotion, and the stories often, are past experiences or the retelling of an experience. And sometimes what they write tells me more than they told me when we were working. So I'm trying to channel what they're saying, but I'm imagining what they're telling me too.
Is there any additional information about the project and the body of work that you want to share?
Probably I would just like to share that the world is invited to come share their stories with me. And I'm working on this as long as I have stories.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing your work, and just not only for the visitors who are coming into the gallery and are here in our Flint community, but also, sitting down and talking with me. And I loved hearing about the process and this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Buckham Gallery.
What a wonderful conversation with Rebecca Zeiss. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, thank you to Rebecca, our viewers, and our sponsors. Thank you.